Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Design Recharge. I'm your host, Diane Gibbs, and I am joined by my friend TJ Harley today. And he does everything. So there's everything from sports design, logos, branding, web, publication design, a ton of really range even in your branding. So I was super impressed, and I'm going to show some of the work as we talk. But
Cool.
give us a little bit of your background.
I was born in New York, a little suburb outside New York City, Pearl River, New York, in Rockland County. I lived there for 8.5 years. Moved to Ohio. My dad was in the tire business, so we moved to Akron, Ohio. And then in the mid '90s, they were bought out by Michelin, so we moved to Greenville, South Carolina. Finished up high school in South Carolina. Went to Clemson, and then after graduating, moved to Atlanta. So as far as getting my start in design, I had an internship with a company in Greenville during my time at Clemson. And then after I finished that internship up, that's kind of what kicked it off for me, and where I was kind of like, oh, this is something I want to do.
Did you study design in school?
I was a graphic communications major, which sounds like design, but isn't at all. It's more printing. So the technical, printing side of it, offset, flexography, screen printing, just learning all about that, which I wasn't really crazy about. And they weren't really design oriented. It was, some design here and there just to get it printed, basically.
Right.
So when I finished my internship, went back to Clemson to finish up, I got a job at a t-shirt shop there, just kind of working part-time when I didn't have class. And that's where I really kind of got my chops and started learning how to use software and Illustrator, Photoshop, that sort of stuff.
Did you draw a lot as a kid or in college? Or
A little bit here and there. I was always drawing like football helmets and stuff like that. And not necessarily sports logos, but I was always drawing. I should have I still have my old book from when I was a kid with all the helmets in it. I should have brought it and showed you. But so that sort of stuff. I was when we play football, like in the wintertime in Ohio, I was always like drawing the field on the grass and the snow, and like drawing the helmet in the middle of the field and like writing in the end zone and stuff. And like my friends just wanted to play, and I'm like, now we got to get this field.
We got to get the field right
first. So just stay there, and then of course 5 minutes into it, we would screw it up anyway. So I was always interested in kind of sportsy stuff, but I never really thought it was a career. Like I'd never really even thought about it. So when I started working at this place called Tiger Town Graphics in Clemson, that's kind of when I really started getting into it. And we did a lot of there was a few things we did. We did just custom t-shirt work for sororities, fraternities, that sort of stuff, local clubs in Clemson. And then we also did a lot of work for the athletic department. So got to work with Clemson and doing some stuff for, the soccer team and that sort of thing. So that's sort of where I really got into the sports design and started, noticing others' work, like Joe Bosak, who I think is here.
He's here, yeah.
Here. Hey, Joe. What's up, man?
So you're doing this work at a t-shirt shop in a college town. That doesn't really seem like breaking into the industry, because but you get your chops. You started understanding what the programs were and maybe learning a little bit more about the psychology about design, maybe a little bit.
Right. A little bit.
And then after
dealing with customers too there, because you're almost face to face with them. They'd come in and want, a t-shirt designed, and then you'd show it to them and you get an immediate face to face reaction. Like, oh, this sucks. Or, oh, I really like this. Or, so that was a learning experience in and of itself. But so while I was there, a lot of the stuff we were doing for Clemson had to be approved by this company called the Collegiate Licensing Company. So everything that had a tiger paw on it, we had to send to them to get approved. Tiger Town was a Clemson licensee. So, basically the way CLC worked is they take, the school gets a royalty from these companies using their marks, and then CLC would take a portion of that for running the program. So all our work would be sent to them. And so when I was getting ready to graduate, looking for jobs, I applied to CLC. I was sending resumes everywhere to MLB. I didn't have much of a portfolio at that point. It was just t-shirt design, some sports stuff.
But maybe had they seen your name, and so you're doing this thing with me about this book about portfolios that my friend Ben is writing, and so a lot of what you wrote, which you guys will have to get the book, it's great, and TJ's part is amazing. So it had about that it was people, and it's the network of people, and you haven't ever really had to do a ton of marketing because it's word of mouth. So do you think that helped get that position because they already knew and they knew what you were doing because of the work, or was that stuff not coming from you?
They really, I hadn't really done a whole lot at that point other than what I had done at Tiger Town. The only project that I had worked on at that point was I had won a logo contest to design the ACC's 50th anniversary, and it was open to only students at ACC schools. Could enter. I entered on the very last day I found out about it, and I whipped something up and ended up winning. So I think they might have known about that, but I don't know. That might have, if there were two candidates, and maybe that sort of put me over the top. I have no idea, but I don't think they had known my work at all. But long story short, I ended up getting the job there and working in Atlanta. And for the next 11 years.
And you started out as what title? Because you ended out as creative director. So really able to work your way up. Right.
My first title was, I think it was Design and Creative Services Coordinator. So, and they weren't really doing it. It was, when I first got there, they were really just doing retail signage, some direct mail type pieces. There was no social media back then. This was early 2002, so there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, so there was nothing like that. Everything was print based pretty much. So just doing that sort of thing, and then we kind of got into logo design, because I remember even asking at the interview, I was like, "Do you guys do logo design at all?" And they're like, "Not really. We've done it here and there." I'm like, this is a perfect opportunity to do that because we're working with licensing directors every day. So we started doing some small projects and then moving into some bigger ones. And then, by the time I'd been there, 5-6 years, we really started to make that a cornerstone of that department. Not really the company as a whole. It was still a very, very small percentage of income, but we were actually charging for the work.
Good.
So it was actually an added value to some of these schools. So
that's great. So it's something else you brought to the table. And again, that's something that sets you apart from somebody else in an interview, is if you're coming up with new ways to make the company money. They always usually like that.
Sure. They didn't know it at the time when they hired me, but.
Right. But you would turn out to be really important. That would be something else that they do. So I think that's good. So a lot of your clients are sports related. I want to share my screen and show some of your work real quick. And most of this, or all of this, would be since have been on your own, right?
Most of it. There might be 2 or 3 in the sports branding section that came from my work at CLC.
Okay. So, but it's really this range. You have the some things that are college kind of connected. You have a lot of things like that. The Naismith, the Fermata, but then you also have the Giving Kitchen, the one that I love with the tree that I can't think of what it is right this minute.
Ventanas.
Yes. Okay. So I'm just going to click on this one to just kind of show people, again, the range of things that you're doing. So there was a video here. Did you do all the shooting and editing?
Yes.
See, people, he does everything. All right. So then, but you're doing books. It looks like an annual report or some sort of promotional.
That was sort of like a brand, not really a style guide, but more like here's our brand in a nutshell.
Okay. And then you're still doing some logos as well, right?
Yeah,
like this
that's
campus
sort of that campus is sort of their internal licensee portal that their licensees can go to and get all their information and report royalties, that kind of stuff.
But then you're also doing posters. You're doing, it looks like a little product kind of giveaways. And then
yeah. That's like a kind of little their hang tag for collegiate product. Yep.
And then also doing websites.
Yep.
And this is all you and you.
That's all me.
Okay. So, which is pretty impressive, especially since maybe you didn't have that stuff in graphic, whatever you called your major.
Communications. No, definitely not.
Right. So it also says something. So the reason I called this flexible, I can't even remember what I called this episode. Something about flexibility.
Flexible and focused.
And focus. That's right. Yeah, I got it. It's in front of me. You're right. I should look at the piece of paper. But that was one of the things that really impressed me. One, that you could do all these things, but we are always learning, right?
Right.
This is a big thing. Again, I'm a huge football fan, so I love, and I am an SEC girl. I think the best conference, but whatever, we can talk about that in another time. But you have done a ton of things for the SEC. You've done a ton of things for basketball. You've done a ton of things for baseball. And as we'll see, just kind of, but you're doing a ton of different peripheries, a collateral that goes with not just the Hall of Fame, but the National Signing Day. Do you want to talk anything about like what's been some of your favorites?
It's sort of, so that Breaking Barriers one right there I did with Fraser. Fraser actually illustrated that player right there.
That's what I thought, because it totally looks like him.
Yep. They needed something this was for their Black History Month exhibit that they had. And he had posted some work that was similar aesthetic to that player. And I was like, this would just be the perfect fit for what they need. So I emailed him and he's like, yeah. And he, of course, banged it out in 20 minutes and, called it a day.
Did you know him before you did this?
Yeah, I've known Fraser for a few years.
Okay, so how did you meet the people that, like Joe and Fraser and anybody else, like at conferences, or how?
I met Joe. I met Joe over the phone a number of years ago when I was at CLC. I don't remember what we had talked about, but he had some questions about some things, and we kind of kept in touch. And then we started working on the NCAA rebrand together. That was his gig, and he kind of hired out 4 other guys: me, Fraser, Sky Dillon, and Todd Radom. Mm-hmm. And we all worked on the NCAA rebrand, Final Four rebrand. None of that stuff is on my site because it's sort of Joe's baby.
Sure.
But, it was sort of a collaborative effort. That's when I actually met those guys for the first time in person. And then they came to Creative South one year, and we all did a panel. Yep. And we've just been really good friends ever since.
That's awesome.
Fraser and I probably text each other, and Joe too, a couple times a week. So.
And then, so recently there was a conference that was sports. You have to be part of a sports team or brand that was in Chicago, and you went and saw. You went up there, right?
Yeah, I went up just for one night. I heard Fraser was coming in town at the last minute, so I went on and looked to see if I could get a flight, and I was like, this is probably gonna be like $1,000. And I went on, and it was like dirt cheap. I'm like, screw it, I'm just gonna go up there for a night and hang out with these guys. Right. I already had plans the rest of the weekend, so I could only stay one night. So, any opportunity I can to hang out with those guys, I do it. So hopefully they'll be down to Creative South again sometime.
I hope so. All right. So, but you do have some other work, and I didn't get there, but I can share the screen again in a minute about some of the other work that you've done. The team HIDI, I guess, HIDI.
Heidi. Yep.
Heidi, of course. Yep. I'm gonna butcher everybody's name. But so you started in the collegiate licensing kind of place, and then you've continued to be a part of a lot of different places. And one thing I think is pretty interesting about you is that you have been able to kind of get in and you become this kind of one designer that they need for a bigger brand. You're doing a lot of things for this company. It's kind of like a one-stop shop with you. Talk a little bit about that, and how do you go about doing that? And one of the things you and I talked about before was doing some retainer work. And I was like, well, how do you start that conversation? So kind of take us through one, like a step by step. So you get it, somebody says, hey, can you do this logo for us or something?
It sort of depends. And I never really intended this to be sort of the business model for what I'm doing, but I kind of just fell into it. I mean, when I first started my company, I wanted to just do branding, go to rebrand schools and conferences and that sort of thing. And then the more I got into it, the more I realized that was going to be way more of a hustle. And I had already had, I think, one or two companies that I was on retainer with, just doing, coming from an in-house background at my old job, where that's all I was doing anyway. It was all these different projects for all these different schools. I was like, I could sort of take that model and sort of shift it where I'm working with other companies at the same time. Which also the variety I love. So I'm not now doing college sports all the time. I'm getting to touch, some different types of businesses, whether it's restaurants or whatever. So as far as approaching them, it's sort of, each situation is sort of unique. There's been situations, the Hall of Fame, for example. So the Hall of Fame, I just started. It was a guy who I used to work with, who was ended up going to be a vice president there. He said, we need a logo for the Hall of Fame. I was like, I'll do it. So finished the logo project. And then after that, there were some other projects around that, sort of like building a style guide and some other things around. They were still building the building at that time, so it still wasn't open. And then it sort of went into, well, we need this, this, and this. And they actually came to me with the retainer idea on that one, where they said, what if we paid you X amount each month and you just do whatever we need? I was like, I'm already doing that for two other people, so why not? And so I've gotten, there's probably, I think I have 7 or 8 of those now, but each one's different, like there's some I go right into it without having done anything, and somebody else I've worked with already. And I go, this is what I'm doing for these other companies. This is what I can do for you. And it's sort of worked out.
So it seems like one of your strengths is being able to juggle and a lot of different things for a lot of different people.
Right.
But one thing I think that comes in, especially in anything as a designer, as an outsider coming in, you really do, they feel like you're part of their team. They feel like, and so that's a really good way for a freelancer to make it, right? Mm-hmm. And you've been on your own how long?
It will be 5 years in November. So almost 5 years.
Did you go cold turkey, or did you kind of ease out?
And what, like cold turkey from my old job?
Yeah, from your old job.
Yeah, I pretty much.
Because you couldn't really do freelance while you were at that job.
No, I did sort of a transition, but like when I left, I still did a couple projects for them. Just a couple little things, and then I just stopped working with them completely. But yeah, I picked a date and I said, this is going to be it. And that was it. And I had already had some things lined up at that point. Not to any extent that I have now, but I had some things going. It was, risky as it always is. But I mean, I think the scariest part is, I always referred to it as an analogy where it's jumping out of a plane, where it's like the scariest part is actually getting to the edge of the plane and jumping out. But when the chute is open, it's not as scary,
Yeah, but it
so
actually does
that initial leap.
Right. Well, it's the actual making it. I have skydived, so it doesn't feel like you're falling.
Right.
Right. So it's just a mental thing, I think. And I think going out on your own, cold turkey, is a mental thing as well. And
it's not I'm not here to say, hey, you should just, I'm not one of those people that's like, hey, you should just quit your job tomorrow and tell your boss to, F off. Like it takes a lot of planning to do that. I mean, it took me a year after I decided that I wanted to leave to actually do it. To get sort of my ducks in a row and
But that seems like a strength to you. To me, about you is your ability to plan and predict maybe what's and not overwhelm, because you're doing something for basketball and
Right.
maybe little league and something with football, but they don't all come at the same time.
Right. Well, I appreciate the compliment. I don't think I'm as good a planner as you probably think I am, but
Well, you meet your deadlines, don't you?
yeah, I do. I do. Some of that isn't necessarily planned, but maybe it looks a little better than it really is. But sometimes it's chaotic. But um, you find a way to make it work. Like I was telling you earlier, I was on vacation the last 4 or 5 days, and Monday and Tuesday I was working most of the day just because I had stuff that had to be done, and that's the only downside to being by yourself, is because there's nobody else to do the work.
I know. When I was in Italy, I was working
Yeah.
every night working for a client. So
Yeah.
yes.
And you try and say, I'm on vacation, I'm gonna just completely cut myself off, but you can't do that.
No, because you want
something done.
right.
There's always somebody out there that can just take the reins and do it. If I wanted them to keep employing me,
right,
then you got to do it. That's the rub.
It's a relationship, right? And so when you start saying no to them, there can be. So how do you set some boundaries, or how do you because really with a retainer, they're paying you a monthly fee and it's whatever, or do you have more parameters in that? Here's what I'm going to do for you in this time.
I think we kind of go into it with an expectation. I don't think any of them I say, I'm going to do this amount of work for you every month and this is what it's going to cost. It's just kind of assumed. And I sort of take it in 6-month doses, where if we get to past the 6-month period, it's like, I'm really working hard here. Like, we're going to have to figure something else out. And a lot of times they're responsive to that. And then there's other times where I've had clients where I'm like, I'm not really doing a whole lot of work for you. So do you want to keep doing this? Because I don't want to just keep taking money from you if this isn't going to work.
Right. But that's also trust.
Sure. It's a balancing act, really, So
what do you think, out of what you've worked on, what's been one of your favorites? I know I kind of asked you that and you said it's really hard to say, but can you?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say the Final Four stuff that I got to do with Joe and Fraser was just a blast. And we're still sort of working on it. I mean, we've been doing it for the last few years.
Why? Because it was them and you got to work with these other cool people, or?
All of the above. I mean, they've become some of my really good friends. But I mean, the project is awesome too. To go to the Final Four and just see, a year's worth of work up around this city, whatever the city is cool.
Yeah.
And one of the nice things that Joe does, he takes us all to the Final Four each year.
That's nice.
Which is cool. So we all rent a house and hang out together and go to the games.
That's a good way to tee it off or whatever. Yeah. I don't know what you call it in basketball.
Tip off.
I don't like basketball. Anyway, my sister went to Duke, so she likes basketball enough for everybody. All right. So I think you've worked on some really significant, the stuff with the Final Four, the Georgia Dome. Maybe it's just because I grew up in Atlanta. But there's, the SEC stuff. You've done a lot of stuff. And then the Little League World Series. Is there a client that is, when we were talking about retainer, are those clients that are those big things, do they come back year after year? Or are a lot of those kind of one-off things, or they have people? Are you working with people in a marketing department? Are you working with other designers in-house?
I mean, again, it all depends. So the Final Four stuff is all just sort of one-off each year. That's Joe's thing, and he's nice enough to hire us each year. But then I do a lot of one-off, like most of the logo projects, like you see Georgia Dome, Little League World Series. That's like usually a one-off every year. Here's the fee for this project, and But then there's some that carry over to retainer work. But there's some that are also just one-off. So, like for instance, the Georgia Dome. I just did some work for the Citrus Bowl not too long ago. So those sorts of things are fun because I love doing that kind of work, and I don't do a ton of it in the retainer stuff that I'm doing. So it's always nice to get back to that every once in a while, because when you don't work on it for a while, that sort of stuff just kind of flows out of you,
Right.
sort of effortlessly.
Well, maybe that's one of the benefits of doing so many things, is that it comes easier when you have to go back
Sure.
to something because you're not always
Sure.
doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I just flipped, just trying to show some people some things. So you mostly work alone, which I think is amazing. So you must be good at planning your time if you're doing a web project and a
Yeah.
publication. So planning really must be a strength. You just must not think of it that way, because I know it takes a lot of time to do that, and you still eat and you sleep and you have a kid
Yeah.
and a wife,
Mm-hmm.
so you really can do a lot of the things that your company needs to do. So setting up retainers, starting conversations. So if somebody comes to you and they don't have that idea of the retainer, how do you start that conversation, or have you had to start that conversation?
I've started a few of them. Again, it all just sort of depends on what their needs are. Some of them don't need it, but the more you talk to them, you kind of find out what they need. If they're going to need ongoing work, I always propose that first. I don't really like to do ongoing work on a project basis. Just it's easier for everybody involved if it's just like a monthly fee, and I just do the work for you, rather than going, well, I spent this much time on this, so I'm going to charge you this. And it's nobody wants to deal with that, So it's just easier for both parties, in my opinion. Because I mean, for me, I'd rather just be getting a steady check every month,
Right.
On my side, and on their side, it's like I don't have to worry about how much time he's spending, or like how much more work we can do. It's just like, this is what we need.
Right. So when do you reevaluate or evaluate? Because you're saying it's different with every client. So
Sure.
I think about people who maybe aren't in necessarily sports, but people have different clients that have different busy times, right?
Mm-hmm.
So knowing how many you can take on is one thing. And it's also about growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're able to grow, because you only have so much time in the day. But how do you reevaluate? So somebody, like you were saying, at that, because I think it's a big trust thing when you come to someone and you say, hey, you haven't really been using me very much. You're paying me. I feel like maybe we need to go to a project basis instead of retainer basis.
Sure.
Or so is it a 6-month thing, or what if they're like, and I think your mom's here, Anita?
Yep, that's my mom. Hi, Mom. My mom is responsible for everything, by the way.
So she was the reason you're a good planner?
No, she'll be the first to tell you I'm not a good planner. She's probably like laughing at everything I'm saying, going, that's not true. And she'll put it on Facebook and whatever.
Well,
that's a whole different story.
So scope of the project. So to me, this is a thing that a lot of freelancers have, is that it's starting that retainer conversation.
Right.
And I know I'm not trying to just beat a dead horse about this,
right?
But this is something I have a problem with, and I would love to be able to do this. And it's like, I do have clients that use me all year round, and there are busy times, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'm doing updates on their website. But then, I've worked with a company for 10 years and I've never asked them to do retainer.
Right.
I think I probably need to ask them to do retainer.
Yeah.
So, but now it's kind of awkward. It's like, oh, are we going to get married? Kind of like we've been dating for 10 years, sort of.
I mean, I think in a case like that, it's just an alternative approach to what you're doing. It's not necessarily like, oh, you owe me more money now. It's just like, let's just look at this a little bit differently and see how it can work for both of us.
Okay.
But as far as to answer your question from before, as far as evaluating, I mean, I have some clients where they want to evaluate it every 6 months or every year. And then there's some we just keep going. And if it gets to a point where I've gotten pretty good at sort of evaluating what the needs are and what the price is. Mm-hmm. Once I had about 4 or 5, once I started taking on new clients, I would go, talk to them and go, well, this sort of sounds like what I'm doing for these guys. So let's start there. And then usually when we start, I'll say 6 months. So and then 6 months, if we're good, then we'll just keep going, and then we'll figure it out, So, but the more clients I take on, the easier it gets to sort of do that. Cause like I said, I can sort of look to other examples.
And we talked about this on our test. A lot of these companies that you're doing this retainer work or even the one-off projects are really established. These aren't a lot of startups, but sometimes with restaurants or something like that, it can be more startups. Are most of the companies that you work with, are they really established companies?
Pretty much. I mean, I'd say the Hall of Fame wasn't really established when I started working with them. I mean, it's called the College Football Hall of Fame, so people think it's big, but I mean, there was a point where they had just opened and they were sort of, getting their legs under them too. So, but you try and work with them, it's like, what do you guys need and how can I help you guys sort of get to the point you want to get to? Another Fermata Partners was also sort of, I guess you could call it a startup too. They were 4 guys from my old company who also left and started their own licensing company and have now started representing some of the schools that my old company represented. So what was nice about them is they've been working with me for 11 years, so they kind of knew how I worked, and they knew that I was going to be a good option for them. I was doing what they needed as well. They were actually a good example of a startup because they were just sort of getting going too.
But that's, again, another one of your strengths is being flexible, is that you could do what they ask and nothing was ever too big.
Right.
And if you didn't know how to do it, you knew other people that could help you.
Sure.
Right. And because you were doing a lot on your own, but you also weren't afraid to take on a project just because it was something new.
Right. There's been projects where I'm like, I don't think I've done some video work. So like that video that we sort of glanced over before, it was a very short sort of 2-minute piece. I mean, I've done a few things like that, but then I've also been asked about, much longer, more elaborate video pieces. And I'm just saying this is not a good fit for me.
Right.
Where I could do it. Yeah. But I'm going to be like racking my brain, like trying to figure out how to, and it's not manageable.
Right.
So there are some things I say no to. But I mean, if they're something I think I can do, I try it. And I'm very upfront with them. I'm like, this isn't in my wheelhouse, but I'll certainly do my best,
Right. All right. So one of the things, it sounds like you have to deal with a lot of other people, and it's not like you're just dealing with one person, you're dealing with a department or you're dealing with a committee. And design by committee can be like death.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us how you maneuver this and how you are strategic, because you're a one person going into a committee.
Right.
And it's hard.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's, I keep coming back. It all depends on the situation. Since a lot of what I do is very time sensitive, where it's like, we need this in 2 days, there's not a whole lot of time for a committee to get involved in some of the decisions. It's like, good, here's a couple text edits to this and go, so luckily a lot of the work I do is under a pretty strict deadline. So there's not a whole lot of time for a lot of people to get involved. Then there are others that I've been working on. I'm working on one right now that's sort of designed by committee that's been a bit difficult, but we're almost there. And that's a good example of a project I started out just doing a logo for, and which has already led to some retainer work. And so normally, if this was just a one-off situation, I probably would have gotten out.
Because it was too hard to deal with all the different people on the committee?
It's just taking a long time, and it's not typically how I like to work. But I knew that there was going to be other work down, so it was kind of just trying to
get over the
weather the storm,
first bump,
and just go, it's going to be okay. Let's just keep moving.
Okay, so what would you tell somebody? So are you just really pleasant? Or do you ever lay it down and be like, hey, we need to make a decision?
I'm very upfront with people when it sort of comes to that. Because I always say I have their best intentions in mind. I'm not just trying to cause a scene here. We're all in this together. So, you know what I mean? Like, let's get it done. Because I think sometimes people that aren't really in the design world try and not necessarily put their stamp on it, but just get involved in ways that they don't, like you're hiring me to provide a service for you. So let me do it.
Right.
You know, like I'm supposed to be the expert in the room. So why not let me do that for you? You're paying me to do that.
Have you ever said that?
Uh, yeah, I probably have. I probably in a
Nicer way.
less direct way than that. Sure.
But one of the other things that I loved in your thing that you wrote for Ben that I had to crunch down, and I think I'm just using 3 words, but I asked you your 3 personal skill sets, not like, oh, I can draw, football is really good. But what were those 3 things that made you stand out or made people connect with you? And I don't know if you remember what you wrote.
I don't remember what I wrote.
Okay, I think one was being dependable, one was listening, and then one was flexibility. And so the listening aspect, I think if you are just like strong arming them and say, I'm the expert, you don't have the same relationship I think that you have been building. And I think that, but you really talked about in your answer was about, it's not just listening, it's listening to them, but it's also hearing what maybe they're not saying. And there's a lot of things that go into just the conversations that you have.
Sure. Well, like I said, if you're being paid to provide a service, then you should speak up when it's necessary. You're not just being paid to like be the yes man and just do whatever we ask of you to a certain point. I mean, you are, but you aren't.
Right.
You know, so sometimes it's just like when, we're butting heads, it's like, let's just somebody decide and let's get on with it.
Yeah. I'm there with one of my clients right now. So any tips for us with design by committee? Do you start off the committee saying, hey, here's how it will work best? Do you kind of give parameters, or do you just kind of let it flow as a natural progression and every committee is going to be different?
Well, every committee is going to be different. I would recommend sort of, depending on how many people there are, kind of find some allies in there where somebody kind of gets what you're doing and sort of press them rather than worrying about people that aren't getting what you're doing.
Right.
Because they can have a way of influencing other people better than you, maybe.
Right. Well, so that's about reading people, right? In the room.
Sure.
How would you tell somebody this kind of analyzing and it wasn't on the sheet of paper? So how do you do that?
How do you
go into the room and pick who's going to be your allies, or do you already know from the get-go?
I mean, I think you just gotta read people and find people that sort of understand what your point of view is.
But it's watching body language, their facial expressions. It's seeing who's engaged and who's not, and how
people who ask the right questions. A lot of times, I mean, it can be a number of things. Sometimes it's just gut. Right.
But I guess that's what I mean. So I am pretty good at reading people, I think. I've had a lot of success in that. And so it's about you analyzing it to help other people who aren't as good at this. Because I think there's some people who are like, oh, I didn't get that. And there's, anyway, I don't know if you've ever thought about how you read, like, maybe it was even as a kid, you were like, no, we're going to get this field drawn right. Right. And you knew who was going to be your ally and going to help not the other kids gang up on you, know?
Right.
I think it is something that starts way early. Right.
Yeah. But I think it's sometimes committees, sometimes whoever's in charge is going to get their way, and that's just the way it's going to be sometimes, and sometimes you just got to suck it up and swallow your pride and go, that's fine, man. It's just,
you just won't put it on your website.
It depends. So to be honest with you, sometimes those decisions end up making it better, whether you think they do or not. I've had a few situations where I didn't agree with some of the feedback, and then when we ended up going back and doing it their way, that there was some improvement. So not always, but sometimes.
All right. So Brian Yan had a question. Do you think you get more work through that mentality of monthly versus per project?
I don't know if it's a tool to like recruit business necessarily. You know what I mean? Like, I just think it's easy when somebody wants to hire me for a project and they have a number of different things. I always just present it that way, just to go. So, because sometimes they don't even think about it. They don't even realize that like a designer could be sort of a monthly fee kind of setup. So they're not even thinking about it that way. To where you go, hey, what if we just tried it this way? And a lot of times they'll go, oh, I didn't really think about that. That's cool. Maybe we'll try that. So I've had a few different people react that way, where it's like, oh, I didn't really think about that.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too. That's what Brian also says. All right, so how do you get your name out there? I know that the licensing or whatever it's the CI, whatever it is.
CL, my old company.
Yeah.
CLC. Yeah, they're now called IMG College.
IMG. It's all these acronyms. I knew it was something. Yeah. So IMG. They've given your name to other people, or as you've met people, right? So it's this kind of network. So you said you don't do any marketing on your own. So how have you gotten your name out there?
I mean, it's 90% of my business is word of mouth.
So people are happy with what you're doing. They talk to somebody else and say, well, maybe TJ can do that for you.
Yeah. I mean, and the sports industry is also full of people who just move around from job. A lot of people just move around from job to job. And, if you do a really great job for them one time, they're going to remember that when they need it next time.
Right.
Most of the work I get is from people who are either 1 or 2 degrees away from my old company. So for instance, like I said, the Hall of Fame came from a guy who used to be there. He became the vice president there, and the rest is history. Right. A lot of the work I'm doing with the Atlanta Sports Council is through a girl who used to be at IMG. The work with the Giving Kitchen is through a girl who used to be at IMG. God, I mean, I could probably make the argument that every company I work with is in some form or fashion a result from working with somebody there.
So that's you being in-house and making a really good impression with each of those in-house employees, those coworkers, and they see how you handle clients. They also see how you handle everybody. And so there's
just workload too. I mean, it's just like one of the things I think a lot of people knew me for there is I could do things really fast, like really quickly. And that's probably why whether I planned it this way or not, like I was saying, a lot of the work I do is very quick turnaround.
Right.
And I didn't go out there going, hey, I can do a lot of stuff really fast. It's just happened sort of naturally.
Well, and you said right before we went live, you were like, I do good under deadline, right?
I've always been decent under pressure when it's, crunch time.
All right. So changing up a little bit, what's the hardest thing about running your own firm? And because you have to wear so many hats, and which one do you like the least? Which thing that you have to do, and which one do you like the most?
I'd say the biggest challenge is, like I was saying before, just the inability to sort of take a vacation, a proper vacation. I mean, I could not leave for a week and just completely cut myself off. I don't see any way that would be possible unless I hired somebody.
So does Joe do that? I mean, does anybody do that?
I don't know, because I don't. Joe's here; he could probably tell you. But Joe's more of like a project-based type of business where he has, he can set up. He can know that, okay, I have this coming up and this coming up, and I can take a vacation here. Whereas me, it's constant, like it doesn't stop.
Right.
It doesn't stop. What I try and do is I'll let people know, like, listen, in 2 weeks, I'm going to the beach for a week. So if you need something between this time, ask for it now.
Right.
But that's great, but it's never worked perfectly.
Right.
Like I've always had somebody, I know you're on vacation, but we really need this. It's like, okay, I'll do it. But I don't mind. Like,
does your wife mind? Because it seems like my husband he minds. Like it's 7 o'clock and he's like, you need to get off the computer.
Yeah. She was ready to go down to the beach the other day, and I was like, it's only going to be another few minutes, and it just kept going. I'm like, just go and I'll meet you down there. It was just one of those things where everything was taking longer for some reason. But
So
Yeah.
what's the, go ahead.
No, I was just finishing up. Those are the breaks, you know, like.
So Joe says scheduling's harder when you're on retainer basis. There's an expectation with arrangements, with such arrangement that doesn't exist in project work. So I
Yeah.
think, so what would be the best part of having your own business? So after almost 4 years of doing this, what has been the best
Almost 5,
thing?
yeah.
Almost 5 years.
I mean, just it's funny. I just talked about how I don't get time away, but you also have this sort of time of the day where you could do whatever you want. I could do whatever I want during the day. If I'm not working, then work's not getting done, obviously. But
But
But I'm not working for a boss who's going, hey, the clients are the boss. So
right.
if I choose to sit and play my guitar for 2 hours in the afternoon, that's my choice, and I can do that if I want. But then there's going to be some sort of consequence for that later on. But I like the ability to know that I don't have to be anywhere at a certain time.
Right.
If I want to go take a 2-hour lunch somewhere, I'll go do that. But I know that this other stuff is going around, and that's, I'm going to be paying for it later.
That's where you're a good planner, because you still get everything done.
I guess you could look at it as a form of planning. I certainly don't look at it as a form of planning. It's mostly procrastinating.
But you said you work better under pressure, so
yeah, I do. That's what procrastination is, though, right?
All right, so tell us what a typical day is like. So this might be one of the benefits of working for yourself, because you might take your son to school and then
I usually drop him off in the morning. There's a like a coffee shop around the corner that I usually go and work at in the morning.
As a barista? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I could probably get a job to both be on the clock and like take a little break and. But I usually sit there in the morning. Sometimes I'll have a meeting downtown and I'll go do that and then I'll get lunch with somebody, and I like having lunch. It's fun. That's probably the highlight of my day, when I just go, let's go eat lunch and hang out for an hour.
So like, do you schedule like, I'm going to do more creative work in the morning, or this is where, again, I would think, as you're saying, you're not a planner, or do you do emails, or what are you getting done first when you're at the coffee shop?
Usually the morning is taking care of emails and just some stuff that maybe I didn't get to the night before, or the day before. Some quick things, getting those out of the way. And sometimes the afternoon is more like hunker down on something I got to get done. Just depends, though. Sometimes it all comes down to what I feel like doing that day. Like I know this publication thing has to be done, but I don't feel like doing publication today, so I'm not going to do that.
So when you are under pressure and then you have to do the publication or whatever it is,
right?
The afternoon is usually kind of like after lunch, you feel like you're the most ready to go in that way?
Sometimes. Depends if I go to lunch or not.
Right.
When I go to lunch, I'm not as hunkered down as I should be, but it just depends. I mean, I'm a pretty laid back person, as you probably noticed. So,
all right. So
as long as the work gets done, like whatever,
Right. Well, tell us about the Little League World Series, because this is how kind of your projects work. You kind of are in it's about to ramp up, or it's been ramping up, or the Little League World Series is starting now. So when were you working on it?
That one for this year was probably done a year ago. I've already done the one for next year, which I don't know when they're going to release that, but that's already finished. So that one's done pretty early on. But that's project based, and that came from the company Fermata that I work with. Little League is one of their licensing clients, so cool. They referred me. I get some referrals from them too, a lot of times. So that came in. I've been doing that for next year will be the third year that I've been working with Little League. So
cool. So is it different? Do you like the people? Do you like doing something that's more youth related?
Yeah, that one was one that I always wanted to do, because I don't think their logos have been all that great in the past. And it was one of those projects where I was like, somebody just needs, whether it's me or somebody else, just needs to come in and really like do a good job with this. So I was flattered that they asked. When he emailed me, I was like, it's cool. I want to do this. So it's been a fun one for sure.
So then another really big client is the Naismith. I'm going to go to that on your site real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So tell people what that is. It's kind of like the Heisman, but for basketball,
the
right?
Naismith is basically, yes, the Player of the Year award for basketball, but they also do, it's not just the men's college Player of the Year. It's also women's college Player of the Year, high school Player of the Year. They have a bunch of, it's run by a group called the Atlanta Tip-Off Club, which was started here in Atlanta. So they also have a lot of Georgia high school awards that they give out. So yeah, they have a banquet each year at the final, not at the Final Four, but during the Final Four events in that city, where they give out the.
So this is another, because I'm still sharing my screen. So this is this downtown legacy property, and this really to me shows your range, because you've done sports stuff, and then you have this other stuff that really looks totally different. Like this is one of my Ventanas it is just beautiful, and I wish it was bigger, but it's not. But like you said, you did all three of these at the same time: the De Beer Garden, Legacy, and then Ventanas. And that to me is another one of your strengths, as just being able to be, again, flexible, do different things. So this is one client, right? And then they had these three properties.
They have a bunch more properties. Like if you scroll back up, so like all of these are legacy properties.
Okay.
So the one on the left is called Stats. Like I didn't do the logo for it, but I did the little brochure there. And then Max's Pizza. So all these restaurants are literally within like a 1 block radius. Like they're all right. They're right across the street from the Hall of Fame, actually. College Football Hall of Fame. So it's like this one sort of condensed area. It's now called it used to be called the Lucky Marietta District. I think it's called the Centennial Park District now, but it's right down by Centennial Park, right across from the aquarium.
Okay. So was the Hall of Fame stuff before or after these people?
After.
So did these people give your name to the Hall of Fame, or the Hall of Fame's from something else?
Came from a guy I used to work with.
At IMG.
Right.
Okay, cool. All right. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was you being like this lone wolf guy, right? You're doing everything. It does kind of stunt growth, I think, as a business, because it's only what you are able to do, right? And you and I have talked about what Joe does, which I think is great with his intern. But at Creative South last year, do you have aspirations to get bigger? Do you like it being in your house and you going to the coffee shop?
I do like that. Not too much bigger. I think I wanted that originally, and like the more I've been into it, I'm like, it's hard enough, providing for your own family than having to provide for somebody else's sort of, and be responsible for their well-being is right. A lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So that's sort of one aspect of it. If I could get to a point where I had one other person working sort of full time, the problem is, and we talked about this when you were recommending Lauren, was that you sort of teeter on this line where you're like, I have enough to do, like, to keep myself busy, but then if I brought somebody else on, then I don't know if there'd be enough for them to stay busy all the time, but then you don't want to hire them and have nothing to do. So it's kind of finding that balance too. So
well, it's kind of where you really do get to a point where you talk to somebody else who's used somebody. So TJ has used the service Recruiting Creatives to hire somebody, and he hired Lauren. And so Lauren is working for him, not at his house. She lives in New Orleans, and
that'd be a long commute.
That'd be a really long commute. But you've never met in person. You took it from me that I thought she would be a good fit, and she has been. It's been a good fit.
It's been great.
But at some point, and one of the things, you were talking to Suzanne at Creative South, and Suzanne works for Dustin, who, if you remember, thank you, Brian, for sharing that Recruiting Creatives link. Talk about hiring a junior designer. And one of the things, so I try to meet with all the entrepreneurs that are at that stage. And one of the things I remember with you, you were like, well, I don't know if this is going to work because I really like to control a lot of things. I want to be able to say, hey, do this, but I also want you to be able to have, be able to make decisions alone, And so it is a different kind of person who can fill that, be a good direction taker, but also be able to give something else, offer something else.
And especially with the amount of different types of things that I'm doing, like somebody that's as flexible doing that too, that can do all types of different work too.
Right. Today, maybe a logo, tomorrow, or maybe not a logo, but maybe they're doing a brochure or some publication. And then tomorrow, maybe they're doing web stuff or something. So it is really about having those skills and continually using those and learning from it. So what from that process, you and Lauren have been working together this summer?
3 months or so maybe.
Yeah. And so what's been a good or bad thing about that?
A good thing for me is just taking some of the work off the plate, obviously. What's great about what she's been able to do is to get things to about 90%. And then I can take it and kind of get it the rest of across the finish line, which is sort of exactly what I was looking for. But she's really just hit the ground running. Like, I was really impressed at how quickly she was able to sort of understand what I wanted of her and do it. So she's been a godsend. So thank you for that.
Oh, that was really loud. Was that just in my ears?
Oh, I didn't hear anything.
Oh, good. Then maybe it was. It was just really loud in my ears. All right. So one of the things that was kind of like in the beginning when you and I talking about it, and sorry, I'm kind of pulling it about my thing, but I did ask you if it was okay.
Yeah.
You had said, well, I don't know. I can't promise. And I think it is that, oh my goodness, I have to be responsible for somebody. I can't make, they can't just be dependent on me that I'm going to give them 20 hours a week. And you had said 0 to 10 a week, because then it gives you some flexibility. She's accepting other things. She was working just freelance. And that was, I think, something that for some of the people who have used me, they're like, well, I really can't commit. And so really it is about an entrepreneur like TJ who's doing it alone, but really to grow, you would need somebody else to help you.
Right.
And a junior designer isn't necessarily going to be the most expensive, but it's a better use of your time. But then you also aren't necessarily having to commit, because it was something that, and you and Lauren worked out something that, so it's more of a retainer basis.
Yeah. We went to that sort of right away, where I was, just because that's the way I like to work with other people. I was like, I'm just going to give you a certain amount a month, and then here's sort of what I expect. And like I said before, we'll go, 6 months. And if it's sort of working out or you feel overworked, then we'll adjustment. Or, if we get to the end of the month and you haven't really done a ton of work, you just keep it. It's okay. Because there may be another month where you're a little bit overworked. So it usually works out.
But you're also good at planning. I think you have a good idea of what is too much.
As you think I am, honestly.
But you have an idea of what is too much.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think it's a gut thing for you, so you don't think of it as planning. But some people really don't plan well. Like me, I'm like, oh, that's going to take me. Like I was working on a naming thing with a client. I thought, oh, it'll be 2 weeks. We'll be done. It's been like a month and a half now.
Yeah.
And they're still not committed, So anyway, so there's a quote I was going to share. I don't know if I even wrote the quote, but I said, you do a lot of different kinds of work and have the philosophy that if you don't know how to, you can learn it, like Picasso's like that. So if you could have been able to design only logos and branding, would you have done that? Or now looking back, or do you like having the multiple skill sets?
I like doing a lot of different types of projects, honestly, because I think it would have gotten the same. When I was at my old job, I really got burnt out just doing college stuff. And I think it would have been the same sort of burnout just doing logo design. And some people do it for a living, and that's great, and they're great. Like Joe's a perfect example. He just does branding. For me, I'd like more of the variety of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I'm much sharper with some of the logo stuff now that I don't do it as often.
Well, and don't you also, it seems like this, at least from talking to you, don't you also feel like you're more part of the team on a lot of different places?
Sure.
And I think you like that. Like you like being able to help.
Sure. And especially that they're all sort of in Atlanta. I have one client that's in Cleveland, but the rest of them are local. You know, and you go to sometimes events that they have, and like you see other people that are from other places, all in the same, and everybody knows everybody. So it's kind of it's sort of naturally growing with. That's why I mentioned the word of mouth kind of thing, because like, oh, there's PJ. Well, I know him. He does work for this, and this. And like, oh, he does work for me too. So it's kind of, I don't know, this sort of collective thing that's building. I don't know.
Yeah. That's good. All right. So here's the question that I ask everybody. What would you tell your younger self to do differently if you could go back in time? And how far back would you go? Would you study graphic communication at Clemson, or would you have gone to a different place?
I never would have wanted to go anywhere else besides Clemson now that I've
been
down for a while. I was actually contemplating transferring at one point, but I'm glad I didn't do that. As far as study, I would have liked to have studied design a bit, just to sort of understand what it was that I was doing, because I mean, it was all self-taught for me. So I was just kind of going on what I thought good design was, and, you know, being inspired by other people and seeing their work and going, oh, I like that. Maybe I'll try and incorporate some of that aesthetic into this project or this project. But I never really had sort of that base of, this is why this looks good, you know? So I would have liked to have had a little bit of that, I think, as far as education goes.
Because I don't even remember if Clemson had like an art department in that.
Really. They have a very good packaging design program there, but that's, you know, design of boxes and stuff.
Right, like industrial design.
Yeah. I think they're getting a little bit more into it. In fact, I was just up there last week just to visit with their football design team, the guys that do all the design for the football team. One of the guys was teaching a digital design class. He's like, why don't you come sit in with the class? So I went and sat in his class for so they are doing a little bit more of that. And that was in the graphic communications program, which was never there when I was there. So they're getting a little bit more into it. I think the demand for it is there a little bit.
Absolutely. More. So what's next for you, TJ?
Oh boy, I'm having another kid in September, so that's going to be interesting. I have a 2-year-old now, so he's fun.
Is he potty trained?
Almost. He's almost potty trained.
Oh, that's good.
He still has the occasional accident, but he's almost there. But I'm relishing every minute of sleep I can get it right now, because I know it's coming, you know, and I'm really gonna do this again. All good. So that's the biggest thing for me coming up now. Work wise, I just started working with the Atlanta Sports Council with their host committees. So in Atlanta, this coming year is the football national championship, and then next year is the Super Bowl, and then the year after that is Final Four. So those 3 games back-to-back years.
And they're all connected with that
with the Sports Council, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm working with their host committee, doing the same thing I'm doing for everybody else. So doing their website, that sort of stuff. So the Super Bowl stuff should get rolling pretty soon here. We're almost done with that. So
that's great. So I want everybody to be able to follow you and to know how to get in touch with you. So they can go to harley-creative.com and they can find
Harley Creative. I think the guy writes like scripts for commercials or something. So don't go there.
So then there's 2. It's your personal account on Instagram and Twitter, and then also your Harley Creative account. So it's TJ_Harley is your personal account on both Instagram and Twitter. Yep. And then on Instagram, it's Harley Creative. no underscore or anything. And on Twitter, it's Harley_creative.
Yep.
And then on Dribbble, it's just Harley Creative, right?
Not too confusing at all.
No, not at all.
I've tried to get the Harley Creative from people, and they don't want to give it up to me. So I don't know what else to do.
I guess you just have to have hyphens and underscores, and it's okay. People can still find you.
Yep.
So I'm just super thankful. Thank you for being.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. This is fun.
It was really good. It was kind of good to dig in. I know I'd asked you a lot of questions before, but your work is really impressive. So I don't know if your mom's still here. She is. She's all caps. She was really excited. She's all caps, Anita. But
she's very proud of her son. I'll put it that way.
Well, she should be. You do really good work, and I think
very nice.
I think that the range of work that you do, all of it really well, it says a lot. So keep going, keep impressing us. I think Kent asked once earlier, and I was going to ask and then I forgot, but he asked, where do you go for inspiration?
Design wise, I mean, I usually check Dribbble 3-4 times a day. There's so many talented people on there. Just sort of blows me away. When I go on there, I feel like it has a very easy way of making you feel like your work is garbage. It's like, I'm not that good. But I go on there a good bit. But
humility is good.
Yeah. It's also like, let me try and steal that right here, like part of that, and like,
right.
Not steal, but borrow heavily from that aesthetic, like I think Brian Steely.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of my favorites. I just did a logo for a restaurant that sort of used his sort of style. I'm like, this is sort of Brian Steely-ish. So that should be out soon. I'll put that up when that comes out. But
cool, yeah.
Very heavy Brian Steely influence on that one. So.
All right. Well, Brian Yan just shared Brian Steely's Dribbble link. So
and he also does a lot of work for fish, which I love. So.
All right. So Jason Frostholm had to ask, of course, and he had the question. Can you explain the love of fish? PHISH for anybody who's, I guess, your mom and my mom. It's a band, just so you know.
Right. How much time do we have here? Spend the rest of the afternoon me waxing poetic about fish. They're one of the most inspiring, creative 4 people I've ever witnessed. Their music is about like just joy and love and freedom, and it's just they just finished this run at Madison Square Garden, 13 nights, called the Baker's Dozen, which I went to the first 3, which were incredible. And they were all inspired by donuts. Each night was a different donut theme. So
therefore, your Twitter handle is a donut right now, right? Yeah.
I need to change that now that it's over. But it's great. I can't say enough good things about them. It's very hard to sum up in a couple of minutes here. But it's not for everybody. I understand that. But what are you going to do?
Good to know. Gives us something to leave us with, because that's clearly an inspiration, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So, and TJ's he's a satisfied customer for me with recruiting creatives.
She got it right the very first time.
I didn't even give him an option. I said, I know who I should connect you with.
And I didn't think I even said, I need to think about it. I was like, done, let's do it.
So anyway, it's worked out, and Lauren actually has gotten a full-time job in New Orleans, and she's still doing work for you, and it's still working out. So anyway,
great.
I think that so anyway, if you're interested, it's rechargingyou.com/recruiting-creatives. And if you're somebody like TJ, you're a lone wolf and you wear a lot of hats, and you just kind of want a junior designer to kind of come help you, that's where my special sauce is getting people like Kent. And if you have the other professors, and you have some of your top students that are wanting to do something like that. I haven't really gotten mid-level. I mean, I have connected people mid-level or upper levels, partners or something like that. but it haven't done a lot of, most of what I've done is these kind of budding designers with these budding entrepreneurs who are really at a growth impasse.
You have my full endorsement. You have a very satisfied customer here.
Yay. All right. So that's funny, Jason. He said TJ needs to have Lone Wolf on his next business, but he's not a lone wolf anymore. Remember, he has Lauren. So right. If you want to get in touch with me, you can always email me at diane@rechargingyou.com or diane@designrecharge.org. And if you want anything else from me, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Design Recharge. And I am going to take next week off. That was not in the plans, but I've kind of had craziness. And I'm going to WMC Fest. So anybody going to WMC Fest, can't wait to see you. I'm going to be talking about beavers, the animal, and how I'm making an analogy to design. And so we are all going to be beavers. I think we are beavers. You're definitely a beaver. That's TJ.
Okay. I'll be a beaver.
I'll let you know what the next week I'm going to probably redo the talk here, because it'll be a rapid recharge. And then the following week, we're going to have Joe Carter Brown back on, and he's going to talk to us about fear and overcoming that fear. So Brian can't stop laughing. I'm glad. What's the other type of beaver? I'm going to let you, our moms are here, Brian. Jason. So
I'm sure they know what the other kind is too, but whatever.
Well, that's true. Probably. Anyway, that's not the kind I'm talking about. So TJ, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we're friends.
Thank you so much for having me, Diane.
Your work is amazing, and thank you for being such a good inspiration for so many people. And I love your story. So I'm glad, even a professor, that you're self-taught, I think is terrific, because you can. We're always continually learning.
Say hi to Lenny for me.
I will, for sure. All right. Well, I'm going to sign off here.